In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis chapter 1:1. In the beginning, God chose the name Elohim to be the first name by which we would know him and come to love him. Elohim is a plural form of a very ancient word for God, the word El, or Eloah. It is found in Semitic texts that date back. It is probably one of the most ancient names used by men to denote deity. It's used more than 2,500 times in the Hebrew Bible. Matter of fact, in the first 5 books of the Bible, it's found over 680 times. It's there. Now, it's in the plural form with the ending ayim. And that has led some to teach a distorted view of God and to misunderstand. But what we need to remember and understand is in Hebraic language, it is not uncommon for words to have a plural ending, but a singular connotation. Matter of fact, there are several words that have a plural ending that are used as a reference to a singular item. Mayim, the Hebrew word that ends in ayim, mayim, means water. Shamayim means heaven. The one I love is transliterated for us is Yerushalayim. Jerusalem is a plural ending, but a singular meaning. Elohim occurs repeatedly in the Genesis narrative, in the creation narrative. Matter of fact, 21 times in the first chapter alone, he will use the name Elohim. Elohim spoke, and there was light. From a command of Elohim, the waters were separated from the dry land. From the word of Elohim, all vegetation sprang forth on the earth. And Elohim positioned the sun and the moon and the stars and the planets, and he would set the universe in motion. At a word from Elohim, life would spring forth, and the oceans were filled with fish, and the land would be covered with life. And the God of creation would bring forth his most majestic creation, as he would take nothing, a lump of clay, dirt from the ground, and he would breathe into that the very breath of life, and the human race began. Elohim is a word that God will choose most frequently to use this name to identify himself with those whom he has chosen to have a special relationship. He will choose a man named Abram, and he will promise to him that he will bless him and his descendants to follow. Years later, in Genesis chapter 26, verse 24, he will appear to Isaac at Beersheba. And he declares to Isaac, he says, I am the God, I am Elohim of your father Abraham. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bless you, and I will multiply your descendants. And in Genesis 28, verse 20, the verse that was read for us, when Jacob makes his vow, he says, if Elohim will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I'm taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to the house of my fathers, then the Lord will be my God, Elohim, the God of creation, the majestic power of creation, the God of all gods, the one true God of Israel, the judge of creation, will be my God. Some centuries will pass, and again God will choose to reveal himself and intervene in human history. And he will come, and he says in Exodus chapter 3, verse 6, I am the God of your father, when he speaks to Moses, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God, at Elohim. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I've heard their cry and their suffering because of the taskmasters and their suffering. The all-powerful God of creation said, these are my people, and I care about them. And just like Jacob, they found their identity in this, the Hebrew people. They were not just one nation among all nations. They were not just a coalition of tribes. They were Elohim's people. They were God's people. And in that they found their confidence and their security. For they knew, just as Jacob knew, that if this God, the God of creation, walked with them, then they had nothing to fear. They had nothing to worry about. Because he would guide them, he would direct them, he would feed them, he would clothe them, and he would always be with them. The one true God who created heavens and earth, who took nothing and out of that created something. The one true God who would gather up a timid group of slaves and make for himself a powerful nation for his name. That one true God still works today. Elohim still takes nothing like you and me, and he makes something amazing. He adopts us to be his children. For I am a child of Elohim, the Creator God.
Forever. This my title for all generations.
Have you ever thought what you would have said and done if God would have called you instead of Moses? This setting in Exodus 3 finds Moses pasturing his flock at Horeb, and he hears a voice. He sees a burning bush coming, that voice coming from that burning bush. That grabbed my attention. He began to speak, saying, "Don't come near. Take off your sandals, for the ground upon which you're standing is holy ground." Then he said, "I am the God of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And in verses 7 through 9, he told Moses that he had seen the affliction of his people in Egypt. He had heard their cry, and he would deliver them to a land flowing with milk and honey. He also said to Moses, "I will send you to Pharaoh." At about that point, we're all grateful that our name isn't Moses. And Moses objected. He didn't want to go. And among his objections, he wondered, what am I going to tell the people when they ask me, what is his name? Well, it was a new name. Some would argue that the name had been in existence prior, but it seems most likely that this new name in its relationship with the Hebrew people began at this setting. What is that new name? It's Jehovah, or as many think, and I prefer, Yahweh. In Hebrew, it's very similar to the to be verb. And that's why God said to Moses, "Tell them, I am who I am." Or perhaps some would suggest, "I will be who I will be." In most of our English translations of the Bible, the word is translated Lord in all uppercase letters to distinguish it from other names of God, perhaps translated Lord, using lowercase letters. The American Standard Version generally translates the word Jehovah. The word is used nearly 7,000 times in the Old Testament. It is often referred to as the tetragrammaton. Nice little Greek expression for 4 letters. 4 letters made up his name because ancient Hebrew did not have vowels in their language. It was a name that for centuries to the Jews was considered too sacred to even mention. Yahweh, the I Am, was the personal and proper name par excellence for God, for the God of Israel. Yahweh, I Am, refers to God, the God of covenant, the one who existed, who existed and who had a relationship with humanity. The nature and character of Yahweh are manifested in his activities among his covenant people. And perhaps the most distinctive characteristic of Yahweh, that which rendered him and his religion unique, was the moral factor in this God. Leviticus 19:2 said, "You shall be holy, for I, Yahweh, your God, am holy." These events that took place that are recorded for us in Exodus 3 are very significant in many ways. First of all, it took place at Horeb, also known as Sinai, the place where only a short time later the new covenant would be given to God's people. There was this burning bush, a bush that was burning and not being consumed. It didn't come because there was a striking of flint that created sparks in a fire. It didn't come through a lightning strike. It certainly didn't come through matches or a cigarette lighter. But it was all contained within itself. What a fitting symbol to speak of God and His independent existence and His unique nature, coming from nothing, but being Himself all-sustaining. This was a holy place, certainly fitting for a holy God, for the I Am. And here we learn of the God of covenant, the God who had a relationship with the patriarchs, and that connection when the past would form the basis for Israel's future. His name, as He said Himself, is my forever name, my memorial name, chapter 3, verse 15. And the significance of the name Jehovah is very significant as it relates to us as Christians. Because in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 15, through Moses, it was said, Yahweh will raise up a prophet, which of course finds its fulfillment in Jesus Christ. And to David it was said, Yahweh will make a house for you, representative of the indestructible kingdom that would come in the time of Jesus. And through Jeremiah, the text says, days are coming, declares Yahweh, when I will make a new covenant with the people of God. Jeremiah 31. And Jesus spoke boldly in John chapter 8, verse 58, saying, before Abraham was born, I am. And that's a troubling statement. We wonder why the Jews picked up stones to kill him. And it makes no sense unless we understand the significance of that statement, I am, with its connection to Yahweh. Yahweh. He was considered a liar and a blasphemer with this claim, when in fact He was the great I am. It was Jehovah who came in the flesh and whom we now proclaim as the Son of God. Our God Yahweh is our personal God, our helper. He is a covenant-keeping God involved in the lives of His people. He is a holy God who calls us to be holy in all that we say and do. And He is the one true God, worthy of praise. As David said in the 8th Psalm, O Yahweh our Lord, how excellent is Thy name in all the earth.
Isaiah saw the Lord, and He was holy. The Lord, who is He? El Shaddai, El Shaddai. Elyon Adonai, goes the song. Adonai, the Hebrew word for Lord. Big L, little letters. The Masoretes, or the Masoretes, Jewish rabbis of the 6th through the 10th century A.D., tried to protect the name of Yahweh, as Ron indicated. They didn't want it mispronounced. They didn't want it blasphemed. And so, in their translations, they would put the vowel forms of Adonai next to every time the Tetragrammaton came along, so that when readers saw the word Yahweh, they wouldn't say Yahweh, they would say Adonai. It's used about 300 times with Yahweh in the Old Testament. It's used another 134 times by itself. But Adonai has its own meaning and connotation apart from Yahweh. What did the Hebrew understand from this designation about God? What did they understand about God? Simply put, He is Lord in every way. He is Master. He is Sir. He's in charge. He's sovereign. He's owner. He's ruler. He is over all. He is authoritative. He is powerful. All wrapped up in one name, Adonai. To the ancients, He was ruler and almighty. To Noah, he was the judge of all mankind, and so he chose to build a boat. To Abraham, he was the Lord of reproduction, and so he chose to be patient. To David, he was the protector of him and his men when so many were chasing him, and so he chose not to strike down the Lord's anointed, King Saul. To Jonah, he was the ruler of the sea and the storm and the fish, and so he chose to be obedient after all. To Jesus, He was the Lord of His purpose on earth, and so He chose to do His will always. Because submission to an authority is not the easiest thing for a human being, period, Our first response is usually not always submission. Sometimes when we're considered with that or confronted with that, we would ask, well, what kind of Lord is He? Well, He is not a surly slumlord. He is not a spiteful supervisor. He is not a mean manager. He's not a vicious vicar. He is not a demeaning despot. He is not a demonic dictator. He is not a narcissistic noble. No, He is a kindly king. He is a benevolent boss. He is a saving sovereign. He is a loving Lord. And He is an adoring Adonai. Now I can submit to that kind of Lord, can't you? O Lord, our Lord, as Ron pointed out from Psalm 8:1. O Yahweh, our Adonai, he said. Our Adonai. And then the same writer in Psalm 110. The Lord said to my Lord, or Yahweh said to my Adonai, our Adonai, my Adonai. He is our Lord. He is my Lord in every way. He is Lord over everything and everyone in every way. He is Adonai over all the nations and the rulers of the world for the sake of the church. And so we are confident. He is Lord over the church itself, and so we accept His headship. He is Lord over our children, and so we will surrender them to His purposes. He is Lord over our enemies, and so we are unafraid and not vengeful. He is Lord over our lives, and so we are totally submissive. He is Lord of our destinations, and so we will follow His leading. He is Lord of our futures, and so we will not fear the unknown. He is Lord of our hearts, and so we will open them up to Him. The famous passage that Isaac read from Isaiah 6, the prophet, after seeing the glory of God and continues to listen to Him and is overwhelmed by the glory of that wonderful Lord, then this text comes along and says, Then I heard the voice of Adonai saying, Whom shall I send? And who shall go for us? And I think we, like Isaiah, when we understand Elohim, Yahweh, and Adonai, we too would say, Here am I, send me.